Local and mainland officials attend a symposium on ways to enhance regional cooperation. A British official says Huawei equipment might not be a security risk. And a devastating fire in the Bangladeshi capital kills at least 70 people.
Good evening and welcome. Local and mainland officials today outlined ways to enhance regional cooperation as the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area takes shape. At a symposium on the outlined development plan for the area, Chief Executive Carrie Lam spoke of the necessity for Hong Kong to become a proactive participant. But she stressed the project will not impact the city's autonomy. Elmi Lung reports.
A show of unity and determination in developing the Greater Bay Area. The lineup included former Chief Executive Tung Chee-hwa, now a Vice Chairman of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and a Deputy Chairman of the group overseeing the project. It covers 9 mainland municipalities and 2 SARs with a combined population of 70 million and a gross domestic product of $1.5 trillion. In Carrie Lam's words, Hong Kong needs to change from being a connector to being a more proactive participant. She also rejected concerns that the plan will blur the boundaries between the two systems or lead to the assimilation of Hong Kong into the mainland. The plan now, as announced today, is to establish Hong Kong as an international hub in aviation, innovation and technology while fostering youth entrepreneurship. On that note, the Director General of the Department of Regional Economy under the National Development and Reform Commission promised more convenience for Hong Kong and Macau youth learning, living or working on the mainland.
滚动出台实施
Some of the ideas Guo Lanfang highlighted include allowing Hong Kong students on the mainland to enjoy the same concessions as mainlanders. Also, the possibility of giving them those same rights and access to education, healthcare and housing as local residents of Guangdong province. Around 700 people, including lawmakers, businessmen and dignitaries, attended today's symposium on the outlined development plan for the Greater Bay Area. Despite being invited to attend, they lacked the opportunity to follow up on specifics, as the event did not include a question and answer session. Though discontent over the plan echoed outside the venue as members of the League of Social Democrats staged a protest at nearby Ocean Park MTR station. Elmi Long, TVB News.
After 2 days of debate, legislators today rejected using their special powers to probe a scandalous MTR project where over 60% of inspection records went missing. The motion, moved by the Civic Party's Tanya Chan, failed to win majority support from lawmakers in functional constituencies. That means no select committee will be formed under the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance to probe incomplete construction records and unauthorized changes at 3 spots around the Hong Hom Station extension. Some were against the idea of invoking LegCo's special powers to launch a probe, as an independent panel is already looking into the troubled project.
It doesn't mean that we do not want to do anything. We don't want to act responsibly. We don't want to invoke or use our power to do the investigation. It's just that we can't complete the work. Justice Hartman was about to release the first report. Well, we should wait for it. And the subcommittee on matters related to railway will hold a meeting in March to look at Mr. Hartman's report.
The Legislative Council still has the duty to look into the matter, because we're talking about the use of public money. Well, since funding has been approved by Legislative Council, we need to continue to fulfill our duty to monitor the government. It is not just our duty, but also our right.
Chinese and U.S. trade officials are reportedly working to hammer out 6 broad agreements aimed at resolving the two countries' 7-month trade war. According to Reuters news agency, both sides are trying to beat a March 1st deadline to finalize a deal. That is despite U.S. President Donald Trump's recent remark that he may be flexible on the deadline to raise tariffs on Chinese imports. Negotiators are said to be working on 6 memorandums of understanding for actions to be taken by China on structural reforms to trade and economic policies. The report also says they are discussing a 10-item list of shorter-term measures, including purchases of commodities and other goods. Huawei's founder says his company will never provide any information to the Chinese government as he continued to address spying allegations. This comes as Britain dismissed U.S. allegations of Chinese state spying, saying there's a lack of evidence of malicious activity by Huawei. Jeff Tanning reports.
The White House's year-long campaign to convince its allies to boycott Huawei on national security concerns may have worked on countries such as Australia and New Zealand, but not Britain. In a strong rebuke to the Donald Trump administration, London says it could manage any security risks posed by Huawei, pointing out that it has yet to see any public evidence of malicious activity by the Chinese telecommunications giant. The head of Britain's National Cybersecurity Centre, Ciaran Martin, explained that it's because the UK has arguably the toughest and most rigorous oversight regime in the world for Huawei.
Because of our 15 years of dealings with the company and 10 years of a formally agreed mitigation strategy, which involves detailed provision of information, we have a wealth of understanding of the company. We also have strict controls for how Huawei is deployed. It is not in any sensitive networks, including those of the government. Its kit is part of a balanced supply chain with other suppliers.
Martin, whose comments came at a cybersecurity conference in Brussels, added that Huawei is proving its worth. He put the ball back in Washington's court, saying it's up to the US government to provide any information it had about the company. Both the White House and FBI declined to comment, while the US Senate Select Committee on Intelligence said it wanted to further understand the UK's reasoning. Meanwhile, Huawei founder Ran Zhengfei continued to make the rounds in foreign media. Speaking for the first time on American television, Ran told CBS this morning that Huawei had never provided and will never provide any information to the Chinese government. The 74-year-old also denied that his company may have a backdoor to state intelligence without his knowledge. He said if that was the case, the US would have discovered it already with its advanced technology. Jeff Tang, TVB News.
In Bangladesh, at least 70 people were killed when a devastating fire raced through packed buildings in a centuries-old shopping district in Dhaka. It took about 10 hours to get the fire under control. The blaze started late Wednesday in a 4-story building in Dhaka's well-known Chaw Bazaar area and quickly spread to others. The district is more than 300 years old and is crowned with residences above shops, restaurants, and warehouses. At least 50 people were injured, many of them critically.
A United Nations Security Council Sanctions Committee has given the green light for a North Korean delegation to travel to Vietnam next week. That's when North Korean leader Kim Jong-un holds a second summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. Earlier, Vietnam requested an exemption from sanctions for the entire North Korean delegation to travel to Hanoi. Some members of the delegation are already in Hanoi ahead of the 2-day summit that begins on February 27th. There are reports that Kim is expected to take the train to the town of Dong Dang on Vietnam's border with China before traveling by car to Hanoi. Trump says he wants to remove sanctions against North Korea, but he needs to see Pyongyang make a move first on denuclearization.
We started off with a very good meeting, and I think we'll continue that along. I don't think this will be the last meeting by any chance, but I do think that the relationship is very strong. When we started, as you know, there were a lot of problems. There was the missiles going all over. There were hostages that were being held.
Once you show your allegiance to a terrorist organization, there's no turning back to America. President Donald Trump made that clear to one woman who fled Alabama to become an ISIS bride and wants to return home.
Hoda Mutana joined the Islamic State group in Syria in 2014 after becoming radicalized. Her Twitter page shows evidence that she made threats against America. She chose to become an ISIS bride and has since given birth to a baby. She now says she regrets aligning herself with the terrorist organization and wants to return home to protect her 18-month-old son.
I know I ruined my future and my son's future, and I'm deeply, deeply regretting.
But U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is denying her entry. He claims she is not a U.S. citizen and will not be allowed to return to America. And President Trump tweeted he made sure of that.
I think it's very, very dangerous when this administration attempts to strip American citizens, people who have been citizens for decades, of their citizenship.
Typically, anyone born on American soil is automatically a U.S. citizen. But Mutana's attorney says the Trump administration is using a technicality.
The thing is that her father was a diplomat at the time she was born, and therefore the children of diplomats, even born on U.S. soil, do not gain citizenship.
Hassan Shibli further claims his client was brainwashed by ISIS and should be given a second chance.
She hates what they brainwashed her into becoming, and she honestly is tremendously relieved now that she sees the light and is speaking out against it. When she went, she was very ignorant and arrogant and angry and thought she knew it all.
This comes one day after the UK government stripped the citizenship of a British woman turned ISIS mother. Now, the British Home Secretary says he might reconsider because he doesn't want to leave her stateless.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is warning the United States against deploying new missiles in Europe. In his State of the Nation address, Putin said Russia will retaliate by stationing its own missiles closer to the United States and fielding new, faster missiles that will take little time to reach their targets. While the Russian leader didn't say what specific new weapons Moscow could deploy, his statement further raised the ante-intense relations with Washington. Putin charged that the U.S. abandoned a key arms control pact with Russia to free up its hands to build new missiles, while trying to shift the blame for the move on Russia.
Some British lawmakers have warned Prime Minister Theresa May to delay Brexit if there's no deal with the EU by March 29th. That or face a rebellion in Parliament next week. More than 20 Conservative lawmakers are threatening to back a Labour proposal for Parliament to seize control of the Brexit process. This comes one day after 3 Conservative members quit the party over May's handling of the divorce. Alan Booknia reports.
The 3 Conservatives resigned shortly after 4 opposition Labour Party members quit, demanding another referendum on Brexit.
And that if she wants to get her deal through, she could get it through by making it conditional on a second referendum to confirm it.
But are there a number of colleagues in all parties who are keen to join us? Absolutely. But everybody has to get there in their own time. You know, we had no idea that Chuka and the team were going to, as they say, pick up the baton on Monday, but it felt right for us to pick it up on Wednesday. So I think everybody will get there in their own time.
Meanwhile, Theresa May was back in Brussels for another meeting with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker to try to revise the draft agreement rejected by the British Parliament. While the EU has steadfastly refused to reopen the deal, both sides deemed the meeting constructive.
We've agreed that work to find a solution will continue at pace. Time is of the essence, and it's in both our interests that when the UK leaves the EU, it does so in an orderly way. So we've made progress.
Since Juncker said ahead of time he expected little to come from the meeting, using the word constructive could be considered a positive outcome. He joked that the plaster on his face covered a shaving nick, not a wound inflicted by May. The two agreed to meet again, possibly as early as Sunday. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Government to meet with stakeholders to keep the Hong Kong Golf Club as an attractive venue for international events. Norman Chan to retire as Monetary Authority Chief Executive in October. And Taiwan proposes a draft bill for same-sex unions.
art can be seen as so foundational to civilization, an expression of humanity.
Why do humans make art? What do these masks say about a lost ancient civilization in China? Tonight, Civilizations at 9:35 on Pearl Heritage.
What you do in a hotel is up to you. To find your ideal one, just use Trivago. Simply type in what you want in your hotel and Trivago will help you find it. It's that easy. Hotel Trivago.
有啲嘢可以放低一時，但好難放低一世。富衛相信退休之後，你可以更盡情去做你一直想做嘅自己。我哋會為你度身訂造退休三大範疇，結合儲蓄、保障、傳承，全方位支持你退休任我行。FWD 富衛保險。
And you? What would you do for love? Miss Dior, the new eau de toilette.
存款有保，銀行有存款就自動受保，保利高達港幣50萬，其他貨幣存款一樣保。保、細保、大保、大細都保，銀行有存款就自動受保，保利高達港幣50萬，其他貨幣存款一樣保。香港存款保障委員會 dps.org.hk。
You challenge yourself.
Oh my God!
We have never had to finish this book.
Oh my God. And it's all good until Phil tells you
that you are the last team to arrive.
Friday, The Amazing Race, Season 30, at 8:30 on Pearl.
Welcome back to TVB News. The government is pressing ahead with using part of the Hong Kong Golf Club for a housing development. Officials say they will meet with stakeholders to keep the remaining part of the golf course in Fanling an attractive venue for international events. Sharon Tang has more.
It's sports and leisure versus housing. Yesterday, the government said it had fully accepted the recommendations put forward by the Task Force on Land Supply. One of the 8 land supply options that are deemed worthy of priority studies and implementation is a partial development of the Hong Kong Golf Club in Fanling. Housing development on the 32-hectare site will provide more than 4,600 residential units. The move has sparked an uproar among golfers. They say international events may no longer be held in Hong Kong. The task force chief explains.
The government is going to focus on the short to medium term option first, because these are the options which will give us land probably within the next 10 years or so, at least to alleviate the problem of shortage for the short run.
Secretary for Development Michael Wong stressed that officials will meet with the stakeholders soon to see how to keep the remaining 140 hectares of the golf course site as an attractive venue for international events. This afternoon, the Hong Kong Alliance of Golfers petitioned the government headquarters. Its spokesman says he doesn't understand how 32 hectares of land can solve the city's housing problems.
Actually, in Fanling, next to Fanling Golf Course, there's a lot of brownfield. The government can make good use of it to build public housing. That make no sense to sports and to golfers.
He added that losing the chance to host international events would undermine Hong Kong's financial and international status. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Civil servants are being reminded of new guidelines on how much transport expenses they can claim for reimbursement. But as Haley Joe reports, one civil servant doubts whether it will work.
Civil servants should pay more attention when claiming for reimbursement of their transport expenses. Authorities want to make sure no civil servants are claiming more money than they should, such as fares already collected under a government public transport fare subsidy scheme. Main points for new guidelines include claim only the expenses occurred by work-related trips. Officers who enjoyed a discounted fare can only claim for the amount they paid. Staff should deduct any subsidies already received before making a claim. For example, an officer who spent $1,400 on transportation fees can get a quarter of the amount in excess of $400, which is $250. Say only $1,000 were incurred by work trips, then a $250 subsidy should be deducted from that amount before claiming for reimbursement, which is $750. But the CEO of the Hong Kong Federation of Civil Service Unions says these new guidelines have some problems.
Use update forms. I think add the so many workload to the officer and staff.
He also said using the same Octopus card for both work and personal trips would make it hard to verify claimable amounts. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
Norman Chan will retire as chief executive of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority in October this year. The news was confirmed today in a government statement, which also noted a change in leadership would not affect the organization's operation or the stability of the financial system. Chan has been leading the regulatory body since 2009. Financial Secretary Paul Chan is chairing a selection panel to conduct a replacement search.
2 Hong Kong tourists were robbed of their passports and phones in Peru on Tuesday night local time. That's after 10 gunmen raided a hotel in the Madre de Dios region. According to Peruvian media, the hotel manager cut off the building's power supply and took guests to a safe location. A Peruvian tour guide was reportedly killed. 53 tourists were staying at the hotel at the time. Among them were 2 Hong Kong tour groups with 41 people. The Travel Industry Council's director, Alice Chan, responded. She said the 2 Hong Kongers who lost their passports will stay in Peru to wait for their travel documents to be reissued. In Taiwan, a draft law was today unveiled that would give same-sex couples legal protections similar to heterosexuals. If passed, the legislation would be the first in Asia, although marriage is still defined as a union between a man and a woman. Still, Taiwan's Premier Su Chen-chang called this a start. The island's legislature is expected to vote on the bill by late May. Voters opposed to the granting of full marriage equality to same-sex couples in a series of referendums late last year. They preferred the enactment of a special law for same-sex unions. All righty, James, what do you have for us today?
It's football, maybe some cricket too. We got a moment. Champions League football, and Atletico Madrid stunned Juventus 2-0 in Spain. Jose Maria Jimenez and Diego Godin were the goal scorers in the second half. Atletico also had 2 goals taken off the scoreboard by the video assistant referee. Cristiano Ronaldo had the visitors' best chance with a 35-yard free kick. Ronaldo is aiming for his 4th straight Champions League trophy and first with the Italian powerhouse. However, the old lady faces a tough task in the second leg in 3 weeks. In other action, Manchester City beat German side Schalke 3-2. Sergio Aguero was among the goal scorers. Meanwhile, the club's Abu Dhabi-based owners are making news off the pitch. City Football Group and 2 partners have purchased Sichuan Jiunu FC. The team plays in the China League 2 in the country's 3rd-tier division. Sichuan Jiunu plays its home games at the Chengdu Longquan Yi Football Stadium. The new season kicks off next month. China Football Group has offices in Shanghai and Shenzhen, while City operates schools in a number of Chinese cities. Cricket now, and England beat West Indies by 6 wickets in Barbados. The tourists recorded their highest ever run chase in one-day international cricket, finishing at 364 for 4 at Kensington Oval. Jason Roy was 123 from 85 balls, and Joe Root slammed his 14th ODI century. The Windies wasted Chris Gale's 12 sixes and 23 sixes overall as the Caribbean nation posted its biggest total 360 on home soil against the English. England leads the 5-match series 1-0. The second match is set for Friday.
And that is a wrap of our news.
Thanks for joining us.
That was what we moved here for, was to breed alpacas.
It was the biggest impulsive decision they made, and it turned out to be one of their best.
We just fell in love with it. We got caught along with the excitement. I feel confident in what we do here.
Returning March 4th, Where the Wild Men Are, with Ben Fogle. Season 5 at 9:35 on Pearl.
You're loved just as you are, and not for what you should be, and not just by God, but by us. We believe that this is the right kind of place, and we believe the Hour of Power will always be a place where people can receive encouragement every day, realigned with what God says and not what the world says, because the world can be really harsh.
Be inspired this Saturday.